Hey, everybody. I'm so excited about today's guest. She's celebrated 60 years of service with the Dominican Sisters of Amityville. And there's so much more to talk about her accomplishments and get her insights into how to have a joyful life, among other things. Sister Diane Morgan, welcome to the We Move Forward Together podcast. Good to have you.
Thanks so much, Steve. It's good to be here.
So let me see if I got my facts straight. You were just elected as first counselor. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, our election was, in fact, just about a year ago this weekend, last March in 2025. But before that, in 2019, I had been elected to the leadership team. So as we were completing 6 years, that's when we had what we call a chapter, which is an important gathering. And we reflect and discuss on our life and mission as Dominicans. But even before that, back in 2001 to 2007, I also served on another leadership team. So I've had some good experiences with that over the years.
Wonderful. Tell me about what was that moment of invitation or that spark that led you to the Dominican Sisters of Amityville?
Well, it was probably many years ago. I remember I went to St. Agnes High School in College Point in Queens, and it was probably in the third year at St. Agnes. We were juniors, and we went on a retreat, the junior class. And I don't remember the name of the book, but the book that I was reading was about the lives of the saints. And it's kind of hard to describe. It's for whatever happened over that weekend, I was just very much touched within myself, inspired by the people that I was reading about. I think that was the point where that spark got lit about joining the Dominican Sisters. So, as I say, it's a long time ago, but I do remember that experience.
You know, when we read about the saints and about the apostles and those who followed Jesus in the early church, many who were led to martyrdom, I always wondered, what drives them? What was the spirit that drove them to do what they did and help the poor and take the directives of Jesus to kind of change the world? Catherine of Siena said, be that spark that sets the world on fire in a good way. And I just want to make one comment. And since I've met this past year the Dominicans and spent some time talking to people, the one thing I always get back to is there's a certain amount of joy that you see there. And I'm curious, what in your vocation, what fuels your joy?
Well, I think probably at the root of it all is the desire to serve God and God's people. And obviously the way that that plays itself out depends a lot on the circumstances that we find ourselves in and the people that we're interacting with. But another thing that's so important with this sense of joy is within our congregation. So we're vowed members. And now for a number of years, we've also had associates. And I believe that we really do try to support and encourage one another. And I think that can help, but even in days that are difficult, still give a sense of joy and an awareness of God's presence and how the people we meet each day can be a sign of God's presence for us. And I'm grateful to have a number of people who encourage me and support me. And so that keeps that spark of joy alive.
Nice. Now, I know that the 4 energy centers that we focus on in this podcast are social justice, ecology, spirituality, and you kind of touched on community. And what's so interesting is in this world of getting disconnected we're on social media, right? But it's kind of an oxymoron. It's social media, but we become less social. In doing my research, there came up with this phrase called stability of flow and a common home. Can you speak to that for me?
When I hear common home, what I think of really came from Pope Francis when he wrote the encyclical Laudato Si and spoke about earth as our common home, and helping us to really reflect on that and to appreciate that as to who we are in the grand scheme of things in the universe, and which includes both the human and the non-human. In our congregation, that goes back a number of years, thinking especially into the mid and late 1990s, when Sister Jean Clark and other sisters, including Sister Margaret Gagliardi, that you know, and others in our congregation, worked together. Jean was beginning what became known as Sophia Garden, but it was a living entity, a garden, yes, but a way of helping us to appreciate our place in the universe and to see God's creative power there and to open our eyes to ways that perhaps I know I hadn't thought in that same way. And so, again, using that phrase, what you said, stability of flow, to me would kind of go along with the idea of energy. And for us, energy is also understood as the power of God's Spirit.
Okay.
And God's Spirit as present in the universe. So it's a way of understanding who we are in relation to the human and the non-human, but it's also a way for us to understand the responsibility that we have to care for our common home. And Pope Francis articulated many thoughts that I think he pulled together in Laudato Si. A good number of people have been experiencing and reflecting on for a number of years. But interesting about Laudato Si, it wasn't just offered to Catholics or to the Christian church. Pope Francis was offering his message to the world. And we're still understanding that and interpreting that and living out of that.
What pops out at me in you talking about this, is the phrase "stop and smell the roses," right? And you can go a lot deeper than that. And as I get older, you find time to contemplate, to pray, and walking through a garden, or just taking God's good earth in, right? And feeling that energy is really something to behold. And I just want to speak to the audience, by the way. We'd love for you to comment if you have any connection with the Dominican Sisters of Amityville. And I've been to the Mother House right here in Amityville, and it's just the building's a beautiful building, and the surroundings are absolutely beautiful. And I think one of the things that you worked on, Sister Diane, was some sort of conservation or protecting.
It's an easement.
I think you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yes, a conservation easement.
Yeah, tell me about that.
Right. So that work, really, we had a congregational gathering called an assembly. And back in 2016, Elizabeth Keem and Sister Jean Clark brought the idea of protecting our land or a portion of it from development. And that time and after that, Sophia Garden became Homecoming Farm, and it was relocated on another part of our property. But what they invited us to consider was, as I say, what I just mentioned. Is there a way to protect a portion of our land in Amityville to enable that to be free from development? And the phrase that's used many times is in perpetuity. So after a number of years of work and various people and committees being involved, in December of 2023, we signed a agricultural conservation easement in partnership with the Peconic Land Trust. And so at this point, there are 10.4 acres that are preserved, meaning free from future development. And in the transition from Homecoming Farm into what we have now, the Sisters of St. Dominic Farm, various efforts are underway, and particularly at the point this year, we have interviewed 2 individuals, farmers, and we have to see how the plans work out. but it is their desire to lease part of that easement for either growing crops, some kind of food, or also for flowers. Now, the flowers on our property have another benefit. In addition to attracting butterflies, which are pollinators, we also have an apiary on our property and a beekeeper who shares. He has hives there and the congregation has hives there. And
Nice.
so the bees as well as pollinators, but they also create absolutely delicious, wonderful honey.
And
The apiary started a number of years ago. I forget the exact date right now, but it's more than 10, with a young
wow.
woman who started a Girl Scout Gold Award project. And she spoke with Elizabeth Keem and with Sister Jean. And so that was the beginning of our apiary. And those bees, I have learned a whole new language about busy as a bee, as I've learned about the bees. But the past 2 seasons and the season of 2024, we were very fortunate. Our beekeeper from our hives harvested 500 pounds of honey.
Wow.
And that turned into a little over 900 jars of honey that we sold to in the congregation and to friends and to a number of people. Now, last year in 2025, it was a cold spring and a wet spring, and the bees suffered from that.
Okay.
And so, in contrast to the year before, last year we got only about 160 pounds of honey.
Wow.
So, the effects of climate on us are not just make-believe.
Yeah.
Our climate is affected. So we're hoping for this year that our bees will be healthy and once again will be able to give us a little more delicious honey and do their pollination job.
Very nice. And, what it comes down to is really, community, tying in ecology, working locally, right? We could all work in our own little areas. And what my hope with this podcast and continuing your mission is to kind of have that little spark for people who are listening to say, wow, that's pretty interesting. Maybe we can do that in our home area.
Yeah.
So I encourage everyone, one, to comment and subscribe. I always ask for that, but look in the description. We have contact information. If there's something you say, you know what, there's some spark there that interests me, and that's in my wheelhouse, we'll connect you with the right Dominicans who can certainly take you in the right direction and move with that. I'm going to turn the page a little bit in talking about, and it affected us because I live in Babylon here. I lived in West Islip at the time, and the devastation of Superstorm Sandy was unbelievable. It's one of those things where you go, I didn't think it could happen here, with the seas rising. And you were instrumental in working with, leading a group. Can you speak to that and your experience with that for me?
Sure. When Superstorm Sandy struck, I was working in St. Ignatius Martyr Parish in Long Beach.
Oh, wow.
Right across the street from the Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah.
And basically in the Long Beach community, especially in the West End, what happened was in relation to the tides. So when the storm was at its height, and again, depending whether the tide was in or out and so on, there were streets that were flooded, houses that were flooded. In the rectory basement, I'm pretty sure there could have been 6 or 7 feet of water, and many houses in Long Beach experienced the same thing. And in the West End, most houses, they were right on ground level. And so what happened there was things like water heaters and furniture and other oil burners or whatever it might have been were affected right in that area. It took a good while for the community to be able to recoup. I remember sitting with people, and it was probably through Catholic Charities, I think. I'm not positive on that now. But I can remember sitting with people, filling out documentation for them, and asking them to list what had been destroyed in their homes. But the other thing that happened was, because as I say, due to the tides, the water came in towards the evening and into the next morning, but for the most part, it did not remain for days and days. It did recede, but people did have to have their houses or their basements pumped out. However, there was one of the men on the parish council who, in the days and weeks after Sandy, went around the neighborhood and took pictures, because we started to realize that as part of the recovery, if people wanted to rebuild, instead of having just their entrance on ground level, many of the houses were raised. And so the ground level became just maybe a garage or whatever. So he wanted to take before and after pictures for his grandchildren so he could tell that story. Another thing that happened in the days after Sandy, there were one of our sisters and one of our associates contacted me, and they came down to Long Beach once a week for several weeks, and they wanted people to visit just to be able to hear their stories and what happened to them.
Right.
And they told me one of the homes that they went to, and it's an older woman in the parish, and when they went in, she probably just had a beach chair or something that they could sit on, and said, I don't have a refrigerator right now, but I borrowed a few pieces of bread and cheese from a neighbor next door, and I'd like to share that with you.
Oh, how nice.
And I think that's really what people, as I say, Long Beach is the area I can think of. Two of our other sisters helped out in Lindenhurst to a great deal, going from door to door. So it was really neighbors helping neighbors, and really just a hard time for people to rebuild or really change the structure of their homes. And, dealing with pages of paperwork from FEMA and everybody else.
Right.
It was quite a time.
It's interesting. I think about tying this to social justice. And at that time, and we were part of a team in the Knights of Columbus where we just brought hot dogs around and bleach. They needed bleach, and people needed to see people, right?
Mm-hmm.
We ran into people from Connecticut who came down to help, which was really amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm thinking about, displaced persons, right? There we have this weather situation that displaced a bunch of people. Those who had enough money in the bank to rebuild were fine. Others had to go with relatives. Hotels got booked up. And that feeling of being displaced is something to remember. And I'm getting on my little soapbox here. And I'm thinking about our immigrant neighbors who get disappeared. And we have to remember that we're all immigrants, right? And that feeling of being displaced. And that feeling of not being able to go out into public for fear of getting snatched up by ICE. So I just want to kind of talk to that. I found some Polish nuns at Temple Emmanuel's Remembrance Program.
The pastor of the parish in Long Beach was very much involved in ecumenical and interfaith work in the Diocese of Rockville Center. So I had some wonderful opportunities because of that, being on the parish staff, sitting around the table with some of our Jewish brethren, representatives who were Muslims. There were people at the time who were doing missionary work from the Mormon Church, people of various Christian denominations. But I'll always remember that time as just meeting people as they were, as human beings, and each one of us brought what we could from our faith tradition. And it was just a very, very enriching time. And just the microcosm of sitting around that table is just such a contrast to everything that's going on in our world these days. But because of that, some of us were able to participate in different ways at Temple Emmanuel in Long Beach and at some of the other Christian churches, so that there were just wonderful opportunities of people gathering across faith lines and faith traditions and seeing one another as human beings.
Yeah,
In
it's
fact,
nice.
in fact,
Oh,
Steve, I think it was the rabbi at Temple Emmanuel, and I believe, if not one, it could have been both of his parents who survived the Holocaust, and he spoke to that.
Sister, I wanted to explore what I believe is a common foundation between people of goodwill, of faith in service. Can you talk to that and your experience with that?
Well, when I was working in St. Ignatius Martyr Parish in Long Beach, there had been an active, they called it the Long Beach Clergy Association. But it wasn't just clergy who were part of it.
Mm.
Because I was on the staff there, I went to those meetings, and there were some others as well. And it was just, for me, a wonderful experience to sit around the table with a Jewish rabbi, with a Lutheran pastor, the pastor of the Catholic Church. At times there was a representative from the Muslim community.
Wow.
At one point, there were several Mormons who lived in the area, and they came as well. But it was such an opportunity of appreciating the people and one another's culture. There was also, I think they may have gotten, there were representatives from the Hindu community as
Wow.
well. But I think they suffered some losses in their building from
Mm.
Sandy. And at one point, I think they had to move elsewhere. But just to be with all of these people as human beings and to appreciate them and to get to know, to understand their faith tradition, even just a little bit. It was just really wonderful.
Yeah, sometimes it's just sad that it takes either a tragedy or a storm. We're all experiencing the same thing to
Hmm.
bring us together.
Yeah.
And you know, I pray, I guess, for opportunities as we celebrate life to bring these different faith traditions together because we have more in common than we don't. Uh,
It's true.
and I
Even
think
even now, though, um, we some of our sisters and some of our associates are part of efforts. The umbrella group would be Long Island Jobs with Justice, but
okay,
then related to them, there's a group from Abraham's Table. So that would be Christian, Jewish, and Muslim,
right.
since we all trace back to Abraham. And they sponsor various events to understand one another culturally. And just back in January, on Martin Luther King holiday, on that Monday, an event was sponsored. And this year, they invited people who have experienced homelessness and to hear from their own experience,
Mm.
what they, or if they were parents, what they and their children have had to deal with. So, as a way of, again, understanding through another person and through their experience, and then different ways that outreach can be made to them. But again, it was through an interfaith connection through Long Island Jobs with Justice.
Y- Yeah, I see it. I see it now with the opportunities in fighting for social justice, particularly for our immigrant neighbors who have been
Mhm.
disappeared. And I got involved with singing resistance, and many
Uh-huh.
of the sisters were there as well. And it was really, it was just wonderful to see the cross section of people.
Mhm.
And to get to know them, and as we stood in solidarity for the good, making good trouble,
Uh-huh.
as they say. And by the way, I just want to look at the audience and say, hey, I want you to comment. We answer all the comments that come in here at We Move Forward Together. If you find that out of the four energy centers, which are social justice, community spirituality, and ecology, if you find something lacking in your own life and you say, you know what, I want to learn more about that, I have skills in this or that. We've got the people you can get connected with. So please comment, and you'll find some links in the description as well, because we've got women and men of action doing the good work out there, like Sister Diane. And Sister Diane, I really want to thank you for spending time during this interview and giving us your experience. It's really great. And thanks for doing what you do.
Oh, happy to do it and happy to have this opportunity, Steve. The more that we can learn about one another as human beings and understand where we come from and what our experiences are, it just opens our minds and hearts.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, everybody. Till next time, we'll see you in the next one, God willing, as we say. All right. Be well, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Steve. Bye, everybody.